My father Dennis dropped my grandmother's savings book onto her grave on January 15th. The soil was still damp and dark, the flowers still sealed in their plastic wrapping, leaning sideways against the headstone. He stood over that little leather book like it had personally wasted his morning. Then he said 7 words that, by the end of that same year, would cost him every single thing he owned. Leave it. It's not worth a dime. 12 days later, a bank manager named Mrs. Hargrove went pale as a sheet of printer paper, slid a thick folder across her desk toward me, and said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Miss Garrett, before you go anywhere today, you need to get an attorney on the phone. Right now." I am not joking. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Stick with me because this story only makes sense once you understand exactly who everyone was before everything fell apart. My name is Simone Garrett. I'm 29 years old. And until about 8 months ago, I was the most overlooked person in my entire family, which honestly takes some effort when you're the only daughter. I work as a claims coordinator at Meridian Health Partners in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's not a glamorous job. I sit in a cubicle that smells like burnt coffee and someone's leftover pad thai, and I sort through insurance paperwork for 8 hours a day. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of town, $1,275 a month, heat and electric on top of that, with a radiator that sounds like a small animal is trapped inside it every winter. I drive a 2018 Honda CR-V with a crack in the dashboard I've been meaning to fix for 2 years and a pine tree air freshener that stopped smelling like pine sometime around spring of last year. At this point it just smells like broken promises. But they're my broken promises and I've made my peace. My grandmother, Nora Garrett Graham to me, passed away on January 11, 2024. She was 83 years old. Heart failure, peacefully at home in her apartment in Akron, Ohio, which was exactly the way she would have chosen to go if you'd asked her. Graham worked 39 years at Bayfield Textile Works on the south side of Akron. 39 years of early mornings, sore feet, and fabric dust that worked its way into the creases of her hands no matter how much she washed them. She lived in the same 2-bedroom apartment for 4 decades. She clipped coupons like it was a full-time calling. She smelled like rose water and always had butterscotch candies somewhere on her person. And she could recall the birthday of every single person she'd ever met, including my 3rd-grade teacher. Which still amazes me. Everyone in my family had her pegged as poor. Just a retired factory worker getting by on Social Security, they'd say, like that summed her up completely. Nothing to show for herself but that little apartment and some second-hand furniture. They said it the way people say things they've never actually checked on. They hadn't checked. And right here, before I go any further, if you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button right now. I promise you, this story is only just getting started. And if you want to show me some love, tap that like button too. Costs you nothing and it genuinely keeps me going. Now let me tell you about the people involved because you need to know who they are for the rest of this to hit the way it should. My father Dennis is 57 years old. He's a regional director of sales at Pinnacle Surgical Supply based out of Columbus. He drives a leased Audi A6. He doesn't mention the lease unless you ask him point blank. He wears a Movado watch and talks about his investment strategy at dinner parties. He carries himself like a man who was born with money, not raised in a 2-bedroom Akron apartment by a single mother who punched a time clock. Here's what you need to understand about Dennis Garrett. I have seen the photos. I know exactly where he came from. I've seen the picture of him at age 11 in a hand-me-down winter coat 2 sizes too big, standing in front of Graham's apartment building on a gray Ohio morning. He looked like every kid who ever grew up stretching to make ends meet. But somewhere along the way, he traded that memory in for a newer, cleaner version of himself. And he stuck with that version so hard and so long that I think he actually started believing it. He was embarrassed by Graham. He'd been embarrassed by her for years. When I was young, he'd tell people she was retired and change the subject before anyone could ask what from. He'd visit her maybe 4 times a year, always in a rush, always checking his phone, already halfway out the door before he'd even sat down. When he remarried 14 years ago, a woman named Claudette, the visits got even thinner. Twice a year. Then once. Then just the holidays, and even those felt like checkboxes getting ticked. Claudette is 51. She comes from what she likes to call a family with standing. Her father ran a Chevy dealership in Youngstown. I want to be very clear about that. That is the whole of her pedigree. A Chevy dealership. But the way Claudette describes her upbringing, you'd think she was raised in a mansion with private tutors and weekend horseback riding. She spent 14 years pushing, in that sweet but pointed way of hers, for Graham to be moved to a care facility. She said it like it was concern. It wasn't concern. It was inconvenience dressed up as concern. And she said it about a woman who still took the city bus alone, still did her own grocery shopping, and still called me every Sunday like clockwork. Once, and I will carry this with me forever, Claudette convinced Dennis to skip Thanksgiving at Graham's because she said the apartment made her feel closed in. Graham's home for 40 years made Claudette feel closed in. The same apartment where Graham had raised a son, cooked 1,000 meals, and built a life from scratch. My brother Brandon is 33, sells biotech products for a drug company up in Cleveland, and has been the favorite since approximately the moment he took his first breath. When Brandon needed help buying his house, Dennis wrote a check for $45,000. Did not blink. When Brandon finished college, he got a used BMW as a graduation present, $17,000 worth of "You're the one I'm proud of." When Brandon got married to a woman named Kristen, Dennis and Claudette bankrolled the whole event. $38,000. One day. And Kristen spent most of it complaining about the centerpiece flowers. Brandon visited Graham twice a year. Christmas and her birthday. I know because I was almost always there when he showed up. He'd stay about 20 minutes. I started clocking it after the third time I noticed. In and out, phone in hand the whole time. Then he'd stand up, say, "Man, I really gotta run, it's been a week," and disappear, even on a Sunday. And every single time, Dennis would find a way to mention to someone what a good son Brandon was for fitting her into his busy schedule. Meanwhile, I drove to Akron every single Sunday for 6 years. 6 years. Every Sunday. Without exception. I'd stop at the Polish bakery on Reading Road on the way out of Cincinnati and pick up pastries. Graham's favorite was the apricot kolaczki, little folded pillows of dough that she would eat slowly while she talked. We'd sit at her kitchen table with our tea, and she'd pull out old photograph albums, and we'd go through them together, and she'd tell me stories about the mill, about the women she worked alongside, about my grandfather Raymond who died before I was old enough to know him. 6 years of Sundays. And Dennis never once acknowledged it. Not a word. Not a thank you. Not even a passing comment. It was like those years existed in a room nobody else could see. Graham's funeral was held at Whitmore & Sons Funeral Home in Fairlawn Township on January 14, 2024, 3 days after she passed. It was a small service. Maybe 35 people. Mostly her old co-workers from Bayfield, neighbors from the apartment building, a handful of cousins I barely recognized. Dennis stood near the back and checked his phone twice during the opening prayer. Claudette leaned over and whispered something in his ear about needing to clear out the apartment before the lease ran out. Brandon sat in the second row with his eyes on his screen. Work emergency, he told nobody in particular. He didn't seem especially torn up about it. I gave the only real eulogy. I talked about Graham's laugh, big and sudden, the kind that surprised you every time, the kind that made people at nearby tables look over and smile without knowing why. I talked about the butterscotch candies, about the plants she named and talked to in her apartment window, about how she always seemed to call at exactly the right moment when I was struggling. Dennis spoke for about a minute and 15 seconds about the importance of family. He didn't mention a single specific memory of his mother. I sat there listening and I thought, he doesn't have any. Now here's the part you need to know about. After the burial at Riverside Memorial Park the next morning, January 15th, the funeral director found me as I stood with a small group of Graham's neighbors. He handed me a sealed envelope and said quietly, "Mrs. Garrett left instructions. This goes directly to her granddaughter Simone. Not to the family. To you. Inside was a savings book. Leather cover worn down soft as velvet from decades of handling. Great Lakes Savings and Trust, Akron, Ohio. Dated 1968. The last entry in Graham's careful handwriting was from 1991. Balance $96,240. Dennis saw it before I could say a word. He took it right out of my hands. He flipped through the pages with that impatient look he always wore when anything connected to Graham's actual life came up. He found the last entry. His eyes moved over it. Then he made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff. Something in between and not kind. 30-year-old account from a bank that probably got swallowed up sometime in the 90s. This thing is ancient. It's completely worthless. He held the book out over the grave and let it drop. Just let it fall like junk mail. Then he turned and walked away without looking back. Claudette followed. Then Brandon, still on his phone. Then Kristen, stepping carefully across the grass in heels that cost more than my grocery budget for 2 months. I stood there alone while the January wind pushed through my coat. I waited until every car had pulled out of the lot. Then I walked back to the grave. I knelt down and picked up the savings book and brushed the dirt off the cover. The leather was soft and warm in my hands despite the cold. I opened it and looked at her handwriting. All those small, careful deposits. $40. $50. $65 once, with a little circle around it like that particular month had been worth celebrating. I didn't believe there was money left. My father was almost certainly right that the account had dissolved in some old merger. But Graham had left instructions with the funeral director. She'd made sure this book found me directly, specifically, intentionally. She'd planned that. She'd planned it on purpose. So why would she plan it if there was nothing there? Before I tell you what happened at that bank, and I need you to stay with me until the end because this story takes turns I still can't fully believe, I want you to take 1 second right now and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Okay? Now let me keep going. There's something I need to back up and tell you about before the bank visit because it's connected to everything that came after. 2 days before the funeral, on January 12th, the day after Graham passed, I got a call from her closest neighbor, a woman named Loretta Vance. Loretta was 76 years old, had lived 2 doors down from Graham for over 20 years, and was the kind of woman who said exactly what she meant and made the best sweet potato pie in the state of Ohio without ever writing down the recipe. She and Graham had a standing Thursday night tradition of watching old game show reruns together. They were as close as 2 people can get after 2 decades of shared walls and borrowed flour. Loretta asked me to come to the apartment building. She had something she needed to give me in person. When I got there, she handed me a small parcel wrapped in brown paper, sealed tight with packing tape. On the front, in Graham's handwriting, for Simone. Only Simone. Do not open until after. After what? I asked. Loretta looked at me with those patient, steady eyes she had. After you've had a chance to breathe, baby girl. She said you'd know when the time felt right. I tucked it in my glove compartment and forgot about it entirely in the blur of the next few days. Funeral home arrangements. Family phone calls. Going through the motions of grieving while also showing up to work and pretending to function like a normal person. It wasn't until the night after the burial, January 15th late, that I remembered the parcel. I was sitting in my apartment holding the savings book and staring at my ceiling when it came back to me. I went out to my car in my socks because I'd forgotten to put on shoes, which I think tells you something about my mental state. Inside the parcel was a business card. Lakefront Credit Union, downtown Cincinnati branch. On the back, in Graham's small, careful handwriting, account 4482917. Ask for Walter. He's been expecting you. The savings book is just the key. Use it. Graham. I stood in that cold parking lot and I read that note 3 times. Walter. She had told someone at a bank to expect me. She'd set this whole thing up step by step like a woman who trusted no one else to get it right. The savings book was a key to something else entirely. I went inside and started pulling on that thread. Great Lakes Savings and Trust, a small regional bank out of Akron that operated from 1951 until 1996, when it was absorbed by Ohio Valley Federal. Ohio Valley Federal merged with Heartland Community Bank in 2004. Heartland was acquired by Lakefront Credit Union in 2014. Following that chain of mergers felt like tracing a family tree where every single generation changed its last name. But what mattered was at the end of it, Lakefront Credit Union. A branch right here in downtown Cincinnati. Account number 448-2917. While I was searching for my Social Security card, I needed it for any official bank business. I found something else. A letter from my student loan servicer dated April 2020. A lump sum payment of $14,300 had been applied to my account. I remembered this vaguely. I'd been confused at the time, figured it must have been some forgiveness program I'd signed up for and forgotten about. Paperwork on those programs is genuinely impossible to follow. The servicer at the time said it was probably a state benefit or an employer program. I didn't ask twice. You don't ask questions about money that helps you. I was asking questions now. $14,000 is a serious amount of money for a woman living on Social Security alone. A serious amount of money for someone my whole family had been calling poor for years. I set my alarm for 7:15. Before work. I was going to that bank. January 27, 2024. I walked into Lakefront Credit Union's downtown Cincinnati branch at 9 in the morning. I had the savings book, my driver's license, Graham's death certificate, and my birth certificate to prove the family connection. I felt like I was applying for a government background check rather than asking about a bank account. But I've processed enough insurance claims to know. Paperwork rewards the prepared. The branch was quiet the way banks are quiet on weekday mornings. Soft hold music, soft keyboard sounds, soft fluorescent light making everything look slightly more serious than it probably was. I approached a teller named Destiny, maybe 24, bright and unhurried. I set the savings book on the counter. She looked at it the way you look at a fossil. Like something real that belonged in a glass case. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "this type of account, I honestly don't think these have existed since before I was born." "The last entry is from 1991, I said. Original institution was Great Lakes Savings and Trust. She typed in the account number. Frowned. Typed it again. "I'm not finding anything. The account was probably closed when the banks merged. I'm really sorry. There's nothing here." I told myself all morning to be ready for exactly this. But hearing someone say it out loud still felt like a door shutting in your face. "Thank you," I said, and I turned around. I was 4 steps from the door. "Excuse me, is that a Great Lakes passbook?" I turned. A man had come out of one of the back offices. He was in his late 60s, gray at the temples, reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around his neck. Steady eyes, the kind of unhurried walk that comes from decades in the same building. His name tag said Walter Pruitt, Senior Account Supervisor. Everything in my chest went still. "Ask for Walter. He's been expecting you." He crossed the lobby slowly, eyes fixed on the book in my hand. "I haven't seen one of those in Lord, it has to be 30 years. He reached for it with both hands, the way you handle something that deserves careful treatment. He opened the cover. His eyes moved to the account number. And then he looked up at me. "Who are you?" "Simone Garrett," I said. Nora Garrett was my grandmother. Something moved across his face. Recognition. And what looked very much like relief. He closed the book gently. "Miss Garrett," he said quietly, "I think you need to come with me." I sat in that bank's small waiting area for over 2 hours. I memorized every mortgage rate poster on the wall. I read the CD brochure twice and still couldn't tell you what it said. I developed a theory about why the fake plant in the corner was leaning to the left. I think someone bumped it sometime in 2022 and nobody ever straightened it. I called my supervisor and said I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. Walter Pruitt was in the back, working through what he called the legacy archive system, old digitized records from every institution Lakefront had absorbed over the years, looking for something that most people wouldn't even know to look for. I was about to give up. I almost did. And then the door opened and Walter came out carrying a thick folder, and his face had changed in a way that made my palms go wet. "Miss Garrett," he said. "Come back to my office, please." He sat across from me, closed the door, set the folder on the desk between us like it was something heavy. "The savings account you brought in today is real," he said. "But it was never the main account." I didn't follow. "What do you mean?" "Your grandmother opened that savings book in 1968. We used to call it a linked account, basically a daily spending account. Small amounts in, small amounts out. Normal everyday use." He folded his hands. "But that same year in 1968, she also opened an investment account. She put in $4,200 to start. Every single dollar she'd saved up from years of factory work. And then, every month after that, she added whatever she could spare. $40. Sometimes $50. $60 when things were going well." I was staring at him. "She contributed steadily for 33 years, Walter said, until she retired in 2002. And in all that time, every dividend, every return, every gain, she reinvested it. She never pulled out a single dollar. Not once. My grandmother. The woman I once watched spend 35 minutes at a Kroger checkout counter debating an 80-cent coupon. My grandmother, who everyone in my family had dismissed as living check to check. She had been quietly investing every month for over 3 decades. "There's more," Walter said. He pulled another sheet from the folder. "The investment account wasn't held under your grandmother's name. It was held in a trust. The Nora E. Garrett Family Trust, created in 2001. A trust. It's a separate legal setup," he explained. "When someone searches for accounts under Nora Garrett's name, the trust doesn't show up. You have to know the trust exists and know the exact account number to even find it." He let that sink in. "Your grandmother built herself a hidden room. She left the savings book visible as a door. The real money was behind it, where nobody would ever look unless she led them there." He picked up the phone. "I need to get my supervisor and someone from compliance. Give me 20 minutes. 20 minutes turned into 40. Then Mrs. Hargrove, the branch manager, came in. She was in her mid-50s, composed, professional, the kind of woman who had clearly delivered difficult news before and learned to do it without flinching. She sat down, opened the folder Walter had put together, and read. I watched her face. And I watched something change in it, small but real, the way someone's expression shifts when a number is larger than they were expecting. "Miss Garrett," she said, "before we go any further, are you listed as the sole beneficiary on the Nora Garrett Family Trust?" "I don't know," I said. "I didn't know the trust existed until about 30 minutes ago." She nodded slowly. She slid a single page across the desk. "Current value of the Nora E. Garrett Family Trust." I looked at the number. I looked again. A third time because my brain was refusing to let it register. $2,847,519. "That can't be right," I said. My voice came out strange. Far away. She worked in a factory. She clipped coupons. She lived in the same 2-bedroom apartment for 40 years. "She made her first deposit in 1968, Mrs. Hargrove said. $4,200. Monthly contributions of $40 to $60 for 33 years. Every dividend reinvested. Every dollar left where it was." She paused. That's 56 years of compound growth, Miss Garrett. 56 years of leaving it alone and letting it work. My grandmother, who my father was too ashamed to introduce properly at work events, had died with nearly $3 million. I couldn't find words. The number sat in front of me like something from a different reality. "There's something else," Mrs. Hargrove said, her voice dropping slightly. "Something that affects what you do in the next few hours." She pulled a second set of documents out of the folder. Over the past 10 months, this branch received multiple requests to access this trust account. Someone filing legal paperwork claiming to have power of attorney for Nora Garrett, claiming that she was losing her mental sharpness and needed help managing her money. Cold feeling moved through me. Who? She turned the paperwork around so I could see the name printed at the top. Dennis Garrett. My father. The documents had problems, she said. Inconsistencies that didn't hold up. We blocked every attempt and required additional verification before we'd grant any access, which we never did. She pulled one more sheet from the folder. Because of this, the date at the top read July 9, 2023. Your grandmother came to this branch herself, in person. She was 82 years old, and she rode 2 city buses from Akron to Cincinnati to get here. Mrs. Hargrove's voice softened. She brought documentation proving she was fully sharp and capable. She gave a formal statement specifically blocking Dennis Garrett from accessing any of her accounts. And she updated her trust documents while she was here. What did she change? She locked in the beneficiary, added more legal protections, made sure there were no gaps. She looked at me directly. The only person named in the Nora E. Garrett Family Trust is you, Miss Garrett. Only you. Your grandmother rode 2 buses across 2 cities at 82 years old to make absolutely certain her son could not take what she had set aside for you. I sat very still. Beside the branch windows, Cincinnati moved through its Tuesday morning. Inside, a phone rang somewhere in the back. The fluorescent lights hummed. Graham had seen this coming. She'd known exactly what Dennis was doing. And she'd gotten on 2 buses and done something about it. Mrs. Hargrove leaned forward. I need you to take this seriously. Your father tried to access these funds with paperwork we believe was falsified. Given what's at stake, the moment he finds out this trust has been transferred, he will likely try again, this time through legal channels. You need an attorney before that happens. She handed me a card with 3 names on it. These are estate lawyers who have worked with us before. Please call one of them today. Not this week. Today. Kay, I need a second here. This story is getting to you. If you're sitting there thinking about someone in your own life who never got the recognition they deserved, please hit that like button right now and share this video with someone. You never know who needs to hear this today. Now let me tell you about the attorney, the storage unit, and the letter that made me cry on the floor of a warehouse in Akron. That night I did not sleep. Not even a little. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while my radiator clanked and wheezed, doing math my brain wasn't built for. $2.8 million. I could pay off every debt I had. I could buy a house. I could fix the dashboard crack and buy a whole new car and not even bother to transfer the broken air freshener. Possibilities were so large they started feeling less like possibilities and more like symptoms of something, a mistake, a bad dream, a clerical error that was going to collapse the moment someone looked closer. I didn't tell a single person. Not my coworker Derek, who had actually helped me trace the bank merger chain 2 nights earlier and knew more about regional Ohio banking history than anyone should. Not my friends, not anyone. 'Cause how do you start that conversation? Hey, so funny thing. My grandmother, who everyone said had nothing, actually had $3 million hidden in a secret trust, and my dad tried to steal it. That's not a conversation. That's a crisis. Next morning I called all 3 names on Mrs. Hargrove's card. First number, full voicemail, nobody home. Second number, receptionist told me the attorney was tied up until the middle of next month. Third name, Sandra Okafor. It rang twice. Okafor Law. Talk to me. I explained it in as few words as I could manage. Grandmother just passed. Hidden trust. Almost $3 million. Father had been filing false legal paperwork to get access. Bank telling me to find an attorney immediately. Long pause. Can you come in tomorrow morning at 9? Sandra Okafor's office was on the 4th floor of a building on Vine Street, above a Vietnamese restaurant that made the whole hallway smell like lemongrass. The elevator moved at its own pace. Carpet in the hallway had seen better decades. Her name was on the door in brass letters, one of them coming slightly loose. Her waiting area had mismatched chairs and a coffee maker that looked like it had been through law school alongside her. None of that concerned me for more than about 30 seconds. Because then Sandra Okafor walked in, and I understood immediately that the furniture didn't matter. She was in her early 50s. Natural hair pulled back. Reading glasses that spent equal time on her face and dangling from the chain around her neck. She moved through that office like every single inch of it was exactly where she expected it to be. Her briefcase was scuffed and heavy and clearly had some mileage on it. Her shoes were flat, built for long days. She was the first person in this entire situation who made me feel like something was actually going to be okay. She spent 3 hours going through everything I brought. Savings book, Graham's note, the business card, bank records, death certificate. She made phone calls. She made notes in handwriting I could not have decoded with a translation guide. Finally, she looked up at me over her glasses. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. Every step of this. She explained it in plain terms. The trust had been set up specifically to skip the normal estate process, what they call probate. Didn't go through the courts, didn't need family approval, didn't pass through the estate Dennis was currently managing as next of kin. The moment Graham died, the trust transferred directly to the person she'd named. Simone Marie Garrett. Just me. He has no claim to any of it, Sandra said. This trust was created in 2001 when your grandmother was 60 years old and fully sharp. She updated it 6 times over 23 years. The most recent update was September 2023, 4 months before she died. Every single update named you and only you. He's going to fight it, I said. He'll say she wasn't in her right mind. He'll say I pushed her into it somehow. Sandra held up one hand. Let him. The bank has 10 months of documented attempts using paperwork that didn't hold up to basic review. They have your grandmother's personal statement, given in person at 82 years old after riding 2 buses, blocking him and confirming she was fully capable. If he stands up in court and says she wasn't mentally sharp, we hand the judge a record of a woman who was sharp enough to travel across 2 cities alone and shut him out. She sat back. Your grandmother didn't just build something valuable. She built a wall around it and handed you the only door. I forced myself to ask the question I'd been dreading. I don't have money for a retainer. I have maybe $4,000 in savings. Sandra waved that off. Estate cases like this work on contingency. I take a percentage of the inheritance when it's settled. 6% for a clean case, up to 10% if it gets complicated. You don't pay me anything until you receive your money. And if you get nothing, I get nothing. For the first time since the funeral, she came close to a smile. That's how you know I work hard. Over the next several days, the picture got much bigger than I'd realized. Tucked into the trust documents was a small key, taped to the inside back cover. A storage unit key. Reliable self-storage, State Route 8 Stowe just outside Akron. Unit 61. Paid up through 2026. Sandra and I drove there on January 31st. The unit was about 10 by 12 feet. Inside, 4 cardboard boxes, a small metal filing cabinet with a combination lock, and a plastic bin full of labeled manila folders. Everything was covered in dust. Nothing was organized in a way that would make obvious sense to anyone who hadn't spent 40 years inside Graham's head. Combination on the filing cabinet was my birthday. Took us 4 full days to go through everything. Graham's record system was, if I'm being generous, creatively organized. Notes penciled on the backs of grocery lists. Investment figures on the margins of electric bills. Statements tucked inside birthday card envelopes. Monthly account summaries folded into recipe cards. Sandra called it the financial records of a woman who trusted no one's system but her own. I called it a treasure hunt designed by someone who assumed she'd always be the one doing the sorting. But it was all there. 56 years of investment statements. $40 to $60 a month without fail for 33 years. Then retirement in 2002 and the contributions stopping, but the reinvestment continuing, the balance growing, the patience holding. And then the personal records. Graham had been keeping a log of family interactions going back at least 15 years. Visit dates. Duration. Phone calls made and received, and not received. Birthdays noted. Specific moments written down with a precision that took my breath away. The date Dennis told her at Brandon's wedding rehearsal dinner that she was embarrassing to be around when she brought up the mill. The date he suggested she move to a smaller apartment to cut down his drive time to visit. The 7-month stretch in 2018 when he didn't come at all, and then, when he finally did show up, complained about where he had to park. The date Claudette said, at the Thanksgiving table in 2019 with Graham sitting right there 3 feet away like she wasn't a person in the room. That moving Graham to a care facility would be a relief for the whole family. Brandon's visits, each one logged. Duration noted. Average 19 minutes. Phone in his hand most of the time. Not my estimate. Hers. I stood in that storage unit and read those entries and felt something settle into place about who my grandmother actually was. She hadn't missed a thing. She'd been watching, recording, building a case with the calm patience of someone who knew one day it would matter. And then the entries about me. 6 years of Sundays. Every single visit documented. What I'd brought, what we'd talked about, how I'd seemed. Simone brought the apricot ones. She remembers they're my favorite. Simone stayed until almost 5. We went through Raymond's old photos. She asked questions nobody else has ever asked. Simone called Tuesday evening just to check in. She didn't need anything. She just wanted to talk. I sat on a metal folding chair in that dust-covered storage unit and I cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry since she died. On February 4th, at the very bottom of the filing cabinet, under a stack of old tax returns, I found a sealed envelope. On the front, in Graham's handwriting, "For Simone, read this after I'm gone." My hands were shaking when I tore it open. The letter was 4 pages, written by hand, the same careful slant I knew from the savings book. She explained everything. She started investing in 1968 because she had grown up watching women get left with nothing when life changed on them, women who trusted other people to take care of them and got let down. She made herself a promise. She would build her own safety net and she would keep it invisible because the moment people knew it existed, someone would want a piece of it. She never touched the money because she never needed to. Social Security covered her simple life. The apartment was enough. She didn't need more things. She needed the feeling of knowing the floor wouldn't fall out from under her. I watched Dennis become a man I didn't raise, she wrote. A man embarrassed by where he came from. Always calculating. Always measuring what he might one day receive. I saw it clearly. I documented it carefully. You're the only one who came just to come. Not out of duty. Not because you were expecting something. 'Cause you wanted to be there. Do you know what that means to a person? Do you know what it feels like to matter to someone not because of what you might do for them but just because of who you are? He will try to take this from you. He has already started trying. Don't let him. This is yours, not as a reward, not as a prize. It's yours because you were the only one who showed up. Every week. For 6 years. You showed up. The very bottom of the last page, a postscript. The student loan payment in April 2020. That was from me. You never asked for help, but I was paying attention. Someone always was. $14,300. Not a program. Not an employer. My grandmother, on a fixed income, had quietly knocked out $14,000 of my debt without ever saying a single word about it. Sandra gave me a few minutes. Then she said, gently but firmly, Dennis is going to find out soon. When the bank formally closes out the trust and notifies him his access is blocked, he'll come to you. We need to be ready before that happens. We're getting to the part of this story that I think about every single day. Before I get there, if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed yet, please do that right now. Tap the subscribe button. Tap the like button. Tell a friend. 'Cause what happened at that dinner table is something I want you to hear all the way to the end. Before the dinner, I need to tell you about the week between the funeral and the storage unit visit because it matters. Within a week of Graham's burial, Dennis announced he was taking charge of her estate as next of kin. He didn't ask for my input. I found out from Brandon during one of his casual check-in calls, delivered in that particular tone of his that managed to be both offhand and condescending at the same time. Dad had already contacted a real estate agent about Graham's apartment. The lease was paid through February. He wanted it cleared out and turned back before the end of the month. 40 years of my grandmother's life. He wanted it gone in 3 weeks. And then Claudette started posting on social media. I should have removed her from my feed years ago, but I kept her there for the same reason people slow down to look at car accidents. Within the week after the funeral, while the flowers on the grave were still fresh, Claudette posted 14 photographs of items from Graham's apartment. China set. Such lovely pieces, keeping these in the family. Pair of silver candlesticks. Beautiful antiques from Joshua's mother. The small writing desk Graham had used for 40 years. This will look so elegant in our sitting room. 14 posts in 5 days. Each one with a caption about family history and preservation. From the woman who said the apartment gave her anxiety. The woman who hadn't been able to breathe in that space while Graham was alive in it. I called Dennis and asked for one thing. Just one. Graham's music box, a small wooden jewelry box she'd received as a wedding gift in 1961. Played a song when you opened it. She'd had it for 63 years. I used to listen to it every Sunday while we drank our tea. Dennis said he'd check. Claudette called back the next day. I've already promised that to Kristen. She really has an eye for antique pieces, you know how she is. She said it in that tone. The isn't it sweet that she has good taste tone. The same Kristen who once returned a birthday gift I'd given her, a $20 candle, because it, and I am quoting directly, wasn't really her thing. I didn't say anything. I just added it to the list. Dennis received the formal notification from Lakefront Credit Union on February 8th. Your request to access the Nora E. Garrett Family Trust has been denied. All funds have been transferred to the designated beneficiary per the terms of the trust. His attorney reviewed the public trust documents within a few days and delivered what I imagine was a rough conversation. Trust was airtight. Signed and notarized in 2001 when Graham was 60 and fully capable. Revised 6 times over 23 years. Last updated 4 months before she died. Same beneficiary every single time. His only real option, reach out to me and try to make a deal. The man who hadn't called me on my birthday in 11 years called me on February 11th with the warmest voice I'd heard from him since I was a child. Hey kiddo. Listen, I've been thinking about how we handle all of this as a family. Mom had some things going on we didn't know about, and I think if we sit down together we can figure out something that works for everyone. Come for dinner Saturday. Brandon and Kristen will be there. Just family. Just family. From the man who'd thrown the family's heirloom on a grave. I told Sandra. She said, go. Listen to everything. Don't agree to a single thing. Don't sign anything. And if the conversation gets interesting, she slid a folder across the desk. Take this with you. Dennis and Claudette's house was in a development in Mason, Ohio. One of those neighborhoods where every house has the same mailbox style and someone is definitely keeping score on the lawns. 2 cars in the driveway, the Audi and Claudette's Cadillac. Inside, everything was color-coordinated. Matching throw pillows. Matching rugs. Kind of living room that looks like it's been staged for a photo shoot and probably hasn't been sat in comfortably since the furniture arrived. The dining table was set with china I recognized immediately. Graham's china. The vintage find Claudette had posted about with so much warmth and enthusiasm just weeks after the funeral. She was using my grandmother's dishes to serve a dinner meant to talk me out of my inheritance. I noticed. I filed it away. Brandon was already there, golf shirt, easy smile. Kristen sat by the fireplace examining her nails. Everyone was warm to me in a way that felt rehearsed, like they'd all agreed on a tone beforehand. First 20 minutes were small talk. Weather. Brandon's job. A whole extended conversation about the difficulty of sourcing the right countertop material for their kitchen remodel. Important matters. Then Dennis put his fork down and cleared his throat. Simone. His voice had that crafted warmth in it, the kind you notice because it's usually absent. We all got a surprise here. Mom had more going on than any of us knew. And I think she would have wanted us to handle this together. Like family. He used we and us like he had a stake in my surprise. Like he'd been as blindsided as everyone else. He hadn't been. He'd been trying to access that account for 10 months. He made his offer. I would receive $550,000. The remaining $2.3 million would be split between Dennis, Brandon, and the extended family, which I understood to include Claudette and Kristen somewhere in that math. That's still more money than you've ever had access to at one time, Simone, he said, smiling in a way that was probably meant to look generous. More than enough to set yourself up. And it keeps things right between us. Everyone at the table was nodding. It was a performance. Polished, rehearsed, coordinated performance. My hands were shaking under the table. Every word I'd prepared went out of my head completely. So I just reached into my bag and put Sandra's folder on the table. Before I respond to any of that, I said, I want to show you something. I laid down the first document. Right next to the roast, right next to Graham's china. November 14, 2023. Dennis Garrett filed power of attorney paperwork with Lakefront Credit Union, claiming the right to manage Nora Garrett's financial accounts. The bank flagged it immediately. The paperwork had problems that didn't hold up. Dennis's smile went very still. Not gone. Just frozen in place while he calculated. I laid down the second document. July 9, 2023. Graham rode 2 buses from Akron to Cincinnati by herself at 82 years old and went to that bank in person. She filed a statement confirming she was fully capable of managing her own affairs. And she explicitly blocked you from accessing anything connected to her accounts. I looked at Dennis directly. She knew, Dad. She knew what you were doing. And she got on 2 buses by herself to stop you. He opened his mouth. Those documents aren't what they look like. I was trying to help her. She went herself, I said. She wasn't confused. She wasn't declining. She was sharp enough to travel across 2 cities alone and put a legal barrier between her money and you. The bank has all of it on record. I pulled out more pages. Graham's personal logs. Visit records. Specific dates and times and words she'd written down. I looked at Claudette. She kept a record of the day you said moving her to a care facility would be a relief for everyone. November 28, 2019. Thanksgiving dinner. You said it while she was sitting right there in the room. Claudette's face went the color of old paper. I looked at Brandon. She tracked every visit. Duration every time. She never once missed one. Brandon went quiet and found something interesting to look at on the table. She left me a letter, I said, and my voice was shaking, but I didn't stop. She explained why there's only one name in that trust. She said I was the only person who came around just because I wanted to, not because I was hoping for something, not because it looked good, just because I wanted to see her. I gathered the folder back together. She watched all of you clearly and carefully for years. She documented every single thing. And she planned accordingly. Dennis stood up. His chair scraped hard against the floor. I'm her son. Her only son. I have legal standing. I'll challenge the whole trust. I'll show she wasn't in her right mind when. I'll submit the bank's record of your attempted access, I said quietly. I'll submit her personal statement proving she was fully capable. I'll submit her own handwritten notes, dated, detailed, specific, going back 15 years. You stand up in court and tell a judge she wasn't mentally sharp, and I hand that judge the paperwork of a woman who was sharp enough to legally stop you while you were in the middle of trying. I stood up too. You want to make that argument, make it. The room went very still. Graham left you something, by the way. I looked at Dennis. An envelope with a single dollar bill. Her note with it says, I haven't forgotten a thing. Not one thing. I looked at Brandon. She left you one too. Dollar bill, note attached. It says, for every Sunday that came and went without you. I picked up my bag and walked to the front door. Nobody followed. Nobody said goodbye. I drove home in the dark. Hands steady. Heart heavy. Because here's the thing about being right, it doesn't feel good. It just feels true. And sometimes true is painful in its own way. The week after that dinner was not a quiet one. Claudette called me crying on February 15th. You're destroying this family, Simone. He made mistakes, yes, but he's still your father. Can't you just find a middle ground? I told her I wasn't destroying anything. I was simply receiving what Graham had chosen to give me. I ended the call. Brandon called 3 days later with a revised number. $900,000 for me, the rest to the family. That's nearly $1 million, Simone. He said it with the tone of someone conferring a gift. I told him my attorney billed by the hour and we were staying busy, and I hung up. On February 22nd, Sandra filed a formal complaint with the Hamilton County District Attorney's Office. The charge was attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. In Ohio, that's a third-degree felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. We weren't pushing for the maximum. We needed the investigation because as long as Dennis could argue Graham was mentally compromised when she made the trust, he could keep fighting. A criminal investigation would settle once and for all that Graham knew exactly what she was doing, and that Dennis was the one who had not. The investigation ran for months. The DA's team reviewed everything: the bank's records of the access attempts, the problem paperwork Dennis had submitted, Graham's personal statement, her handwritten logs. It was some of the most thorough documentation of family dysfunction I've ever seen laid out on a conference table. Dennis hired a criminal defense attorney, a good one from Columbus. Legal fees added up fast. By May, he'd spent over $47,000 in attorney costs alone. Their savings were running out. Here's the part one didn't see coming. In early June, Claudette quietly met with a divorce lawyer. She learned that if she filed before any criminal conviction came down, she could protect her share of their shared assets. Wait until after, and everything they owned could become fair game for legal debts and court-ordered repayments. Claudette filed for divorce in late June. Irreconcilable differences, the paperwork said. I had my own description for it, but I kept that to myself. In July, the trust transfer was officially completed. The Nora E. Garrett Family Trust, $2,847,519, confirmed and transferred to me. Minus Sandra's 6% fee of $171,000. Minus federal and state taxes of roughly $310,000. That left me with approximately $2.3 million. I know that sounds like I'm complaining about the math, I am absolutely not complaining. But I did spend one evening sitting on my kitchen floor at 11 at night Googling, do I need a financial advisor, and what is a fiduciary actually, and is it normal to feel strange about money you never expected? Graham would have had a color-coded spreadsheet ready to go before the wire transfer even cleared. I was eating cereal off a paper towel and asking the internet questions that a 12-year-old with a savings account could probably answer. She would have thought that was hilarious. She would have laughed that big loud laugh and handed me a butterscotch candy and sat me down and explained the whole thing from the beginning. In August, the DA put a plea offer on the table. Plead guilty to attempted financial exploitation, accept a reduced charge, serve 3 years of probation, carry a felony conviction on his permanent record. No prison, but a criminal record that follows you into every background check for the rest of your professional life. His attorney told him to take it. Fighting would cost more money than he had left. The evidence was solid. Trial would almost certainly go worse. Dennis Garrett, the man who had spent 30 years building a version of himself that had nothing to do with where he actually came from, stood in a courtroom and pleaded guilty to attempting to steal from his own mother. The records went public. In October, Pinnacle Surgical Supply ran their routine employee background review. Their policy on felony financial convictions was clear, especially in roles involving billing, inventory, and account management. Through 15 years with the company, Dennis Garrett was let go. At 57 years old with a felony on his record, he was finished in his field. No surgical supply company, no medical device firm, no company that handles sensitive financial transactions is going to hire someone convicted of elder financial fraud. That door was closed. The house went on the market in November. Legal bills, divorce settlement, no income coming in. The Audi went back to the dealership. The man who dropped a savings book onto a grave because he'd already decided what it was worth ended up with considerably less than the cost of the paper it was printed on. Brandon quietly stepped back the moment the plea deal was public. His pharmaceutical company didn't love the optics of a regional sales rep with a convicted felon in his immediate family. He stopped answering Dennis's calls. He and Kristen relocated to the Nashville area. Last I heard, they were reevaluating their priorities, which I believe is a polite way of saying the plan they'd been quietly counting on no longer existed. In December, a small package arrived from Sandra's office. The note with it just said, "Thought you'd want to have this." Inside was Graham's music box. The wooden one from 1961. The one Claudette had promised to Kristen. Trust documents had specifically listed it. The music box goes to Simone. The song is Moon River. Play it and think of me. I sat down on my apartment floor in the December afternoon light and opened it. The mechanism was old and a little warped, and the song came out uneven, the notes slightly off in places, like it was finding its way back to itself after years of sitting still. Still played. And the sound of it, tinny and imperfect and real, took me straight back to Graham's kitchen table. Tea getting cold. Apricot pastries between us. Afternoon light coming sideways through her apartment windows. Inside the velvet lining, tucked in a small fold I almost missed, was a photograph. The two of us together on her apartment balcony, some summer years ago, both squinting into the sun, teacups in our hands, both smiling the kind of smile you only smile when you've completely forgotten to perform one. On the back of the photograph, in Graham's handwriting, "My favorite days were always the ones you showed up for." I drove to Riverside Memorial Park a few weeks later. The headstone had been placed, plain gray granite, just her name and the years. Nothing extra. She wouldn't have wanted anything extra. I brought the savings book. The one Dennis had let fall from his hand because he'd already made up his mind about what it was. I didn't leave it. I kept it. Some things deserve better than being thrown away by someone who didn't bother to look closely. Loretta Vance made the drive from Akron that same morning to meet me there. She'd stayed in touch since January, checking in the way people do when they genuinely love the person you both lost. We stood at the headstone for a long time without talking. Then she said, she'd knock on my door every Sunday evening after your visits. Every single week. She'd tell me what you two talked about, what you brought, how you seemed. She had this look on her face like, Loretta paused, getting the words right, like someone had just reminded her she was still worth knowing. I didn't have anything to say to that. I still don't really. Here's what I've thought about the most in all the months since. Graham never needed to be rescued. She never needed me to swoop in or notice or do something dramatic on her behalf. She just needed someone to show up, week after week, with pastries and time and no agenda. That's all. And in return, quietly, carefully, over 56 years of patience and discipline and doing the thing everyone else told her was pointless, she built something that made sure I would be okay. Some people think love is something you measure in gestures, in big moments and big price tags. Graham measured it in Sundays. 6 years worth. She counted every one. She wrote them all down. And she made sure that the person who showed up for her got taken care of in return. The savings book sits on my bookshelf now. Leather soft with age, worn from over half a century of handling. First entry 1968. Last entry 1991. And somewhere in between those dates, a whole life, small deposits, steady patience, and the absolute refusal to let anyone else decide what she was worth. I look at it sometimes when I need a reminder about the long game. If this story hit you in a place that's hard to name, if it made you think of someone you love or someone you lost or someone who never got the credit they deserved, please take 2 seconds and hit that subscribe button and smash the like button. Genuinely makes a difference and it keeps these stories coming. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from right now and what time it is there. I see every single comment and it means more to me than I can put into words. There are more stories waiting for you on your screen right now. Click on one. I'll see you in the next one.